Oh, what a night. Tuesday, I made a video talking about a fix I'm putting in, how I'm having to deal with other people's code, a little rant. This is now Wednesday. I worked till 4 a.m., went to bed, woke up noonish, one-ish. When you're dreaming away, when I went to bed last night, the code, I went on the third or fourth iteration of trying to find out what works. And by the way, when you're writing code and you're a programmer, when you're writing code and you're a programmer, you spend a tremendous amount of your time trying to figure out what works. What works, what doesn't work. Keep that in mind. You're not failing by failing to get it to work. It's part of the process. So last night, barely could sleep, or I should say this morning, barely could see. Exhausted, beaten up. I've been working on this problem from converting my program from a complete standalone in the IDE to being deployed through WebStart. What a nightmare. WebStart is a great program. Open WebStart. You guys who are working on it, thumbs up. I had to go through your source code. Thankfully, it's publicly available to find out what you were doing and why it was crashing and why it was crashing my code out. Finally going through after all the repositories of code, walking through, and thumbs up to you guys for not using a whole bunch of shortcuts. Nowadays, people are really into short, concise little code. And if you're not in the mindset of the programmer, you can't figure out what the heck they were doing. Well, fortunately, these guys at least wrote the code in Java. They didn't use lambdas. They didn't use syntactical sugar. It was pure and simple Java. I was able to search it with the IDE. I was able to read their code, and I was able to understand what they were doing and what they were looking for. The code was not obfuscated in its face. It was great. Thumbs up to you. Open WebStart people, love you. From that, I was able to figure out what they were doing, why the system was crashing. There were no warnings. Of course, they probably didn't figure that this was going to be an issue. Most people don't do native code in WebStart or native deployed code, JNI type code in WebStart. Heavyweight components, Java native interfaces. Anyway, I'm manic because I finally got my code to work. After 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 10 attempts, 10 different techniques and attempts. Testing WebStart, testing against the IDE, testing against the standalone, testing, going down into WebStart's code, seeing what they are doing to set up the environment that my code was going to run off of, then actually having to go into the libraries of the native code that I was using and find out what they were looking for and try to make a happy marriage of the two. Okay, guys, this is what programming is about. Solving problems. Two different programmers, two different libraries that I'm merging together as part of my other libraries. And because the way they were written, they didn't work. But fortunately, both sets of programmers, both development teams kept the code clean, kept the code easy to read, documented it, thank you. And I was able to figure out what the code base I was looking for what I was using was looking for, the code base that I was going to use to deploy was looking for. And after going through class loaders and derivations of class loaders and just all sorts of bizarre hacks. I used to be able to use Java reflection. Now I'm going down into the weeds, guys, forgive me. But I used to use techniques which are now illegal because the virtual machine no longer allows them to happen. The Java engine prevents you from digging down, diving into the code and flipping switches anymore. It's a no-no. Reflection's a no-no, apparently. Oh, well, I was able to make the code work. 5 minutes ago, I had dreamed about it. I had dreams about what I needed to do. I woke up, got breakfast, straightened out the hair, and I went and I did the test, and I did the test in the IDE, the integrated development environment, and it worked. I said, okay, fine. I did the test and did a deployment. It didn't work. I stopped and thought about it. I thought about how the library that I was implementing did its thing. I thought about how WebStart was doing its thing, and then it finally dawned on me. I did one more line of code change and deployed it, and it works. It's stable. It works. So I spent substantial substantially more time finding out what didn't work than I found out what did work. So if you're a programmer and you do this for a living, you are going to spend more time, especially when you get into really just deep in the weeds, operating system level stuff, deployments on multiple environments that you don't control, things of this nature. You're going to be spending more time. It's not sexy. It's not fun and thrilling writing semantic sugar code. It's the real work. So get ready as a programmer to spend time doing things that don't work till you find the thing that does work. And it's normal. We all do it. I'm sort of manic because I have been just driving into this problem for over a week, trying to figure things out, just walking through a list of possibilities in my mind, going through each possibility, testing them and checking them off, and just hitting a frustration. It's sort of binary. It either worked or it didn't work. It would crash with no reason or it wouldn't crash. Fortunately, I set up a test environment. I set up a known, which was my development environment. It was my known. I set up a standalone environment, and I set up a web start environment. And between all three of those, I figured out what was missing in the web start environment and what the web start environment was doing to my code base. Basic science, basic test and evaluate, test and evaluate, test and evaluate. You have a known and it works. You have a known and it fails. What's the difference between the two of them? Then you look into the code base and you figure out, and this wasn't documented, guys. There's lots of undocumented stuff, but fortunately, the code was there. Fortunately, the code was readable. And by the way, all you young programmers, readable code is substantially more important than short code. The computer will, or the compiler will take it down into bytecode, and we don't care. But when you're writing code for the public, and I mean for the public, I don't care what you do for your own project that you're going to keep or sell or something where you're never going to see the source code. But when you're writing code for the public, make sure that your code is readable. If I was a CTO for your company, and I've been a CTO for a couple companies, I've been head developers, if I can't sit down and read your code like I read the newspaper or Google or anything else, newspaper's old, if I can't read your code like I read a book or a story, you're going to get fired. If you're working for me and you're producing code for me, I have to be able at 2 o'clock in the morning to sit down with you and try to figure out why your code isn't working. And if I have to go through and find all the lambdas or find all the shortcuts, or you've got stuff in Kotlin, which is really sexy because it's only 3 lines of code as compared to Java when it would be 20 lines of code. Trust me, I'll take the Java at 20 lines of code because at least I can walk through without having to have the IDE tell me what you're doing and dive down in. And I won't need you to be sitting with me at 2 o'clock in the morning debugging your code. Anyway, young programmers, new programmers, short, concise code is not always the thing. Verbose code that can be read, that is a story that is easy to understand, is where it's at. If you think it's sexy to have to take 20 or 30 lines of code and bring it down to 5 or 6 lines of code, it's only sexy if the code works. If you have to debug it or figure out what you're doing or modify it, then it becomes not sexy anymore. So don't be so concise in your coding style that you can't be flexible and debug it. Anyway, enough said. If you haven't written code for a production environment and then had to go back and debug it, modify it, or because something tweaked, you don't know what I'm talking about. So young programmers, keep that in mind. Anyway, I'm jazzed. I'm thrilled. My code now deploys in an environment that I like. I'm going to cross-platform test it, but most of my customers right now are Windows and Linux based. I'm not going to worry about OS X right now. Whew. Happy days for me. Anyway, hope you enjoy this. If you're a programmer, this is the high you get from suffering through weeks worth of frustration. This is it, guys. Anyway, you got any thoughts? Let me know. My personal project is finally moving forward. This is the upside of the downside of programming. The high you get from being successful at a really hard problem. Have a good one. Happy Wednesday to you. Talk to you later. Take care. Bye.